Alright, so in this video, we're going to be taking a little trip down memory lane and looking at some 2021 college football recruiting 5-stars that are, at this point at least, busts. Now, these kids have played most of them have played 3 years of college ball. Certainly they could turn it around in their senior seasons, but this is just something I wanted to do, go back to 2021, beginning with Foreman. He was the number 2 overall player, defensive lineman, committed to USC from California, so not surprising. I remember his recruitment seemed like he was going to go to Clemson, but he ends up choosing USC, and he's part of that terrible Alex Grinch defense. Unfortunately, a lot of people think he was kind of misused, underdeveloped. You can take a look at his entire career. Really, his best year was as a true freshman. He had 3.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. This past year, only appearing in 3 games with 1 assist. Foreman, he's going to need a big senior year, in USC trying to remake their defense. I mean, at this point, being the number 2 overall player in your class as a pass rusher, you would expect to, at this point, be headed to the NFL draft. But with only 2.5 sacks in his career, 0 sacks the past 2 years, Foreman really looking to find his footing next year in college football. Moving on to the next bust, it is Tommy Brockermeyer, the offensive tackle originally from Texas, committed to Alabama. I remember this recruitment. It was Texas versus Alabama. Seemed like he was going to go to Texas, but then he commits to Bama. And also his brother, who was a center, the number 1 center in the class, committed to Alabama as well. It did not go well at Alabama. He transferred out after last year, and now he is on TCU, and in doing some research, I learned that apparently he was not starting on TCU, so that is a big red flag if you are, an elite offensive tackle. This kid, you would expect him to be just a plug-and-play beast left tackle, being a top 10 overall player, being the number 2 offensive tackle in your entire class. You would have figured, at this point he would be preparing to possibly be a top 10 pick, but he is on TCU at this point after playing sparingly for Alabama. The next one, it is Sam Huard. This one is really extreme. So the number 12 overall player, the number 3 quarterback, pro style, from Washington. He commits to Washington, and he was there for 2 years, had 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions. All of the action really coming as a freshman, as a sophomore, only appearing in 1 game. He did go 2 of 2 for 24 yards, so at least he had that, and then he transferred to Cal Poly, the FCS school. So this kid, in the span of 3 years, being one of the top recruits, he is left-handed, one of the top recruits to playing at an FCS school. I believe maybe his father is the coach at Cal Poly. That's part of the reason why he went there. I mean, he could have gone to a decent mid-major, I'm sure, but either way, he was a clear bust at Washington, and Washington kind of had a weird situation. They were able to get Michael Penix Jr., utilize the portal, kind of a different age in college football where even if you're a 5-star, if you're not producing by year 2, year 3, it's time to transfer out, and that's what happened to Sam Huard. 1 touchdown pass. Nobody thought that when that kid committed to Washington, part of that signing class. 5-star QB commits to Washington, and his career, 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions. His stats last year with Cal Poly weren't really that good. I mean, 18 touchdowns, 10 interceptions for an FCS school. That's not great. Moving on to the next potential bust, it is Terrence Lewis, the rangy linebacker, the athletic linebacker, originally from Florida. Had a pretty crazy recruitment. I remember a number of top schools being in on him. Originally, I believe he committed to Tennessee, then decommitted, and Maryland. This was the jewel of their 2020 recruiting class, the number 1 overall linebacker, top 25 overall player. And he actually registered no stats with Maryland. He had off-the-field problems. He ends up transferring to UCF, and in his career, he has 1 total tackle right now, 3 years into his college career. So 5-star linebacker that has 1 total tackle right now going in to year 4 next year. Pretty crazy. Moving on to the next one, it is Damon Payne. So kind of a weird one here. The defensive tackle from Michigan committed to Alabama, the number 24 overall player, and the number 1 player in the state of Michigan. Now, the high school that he went to, apparently Michigan, Jim Harbaugh didn't really get along with the high school, so that's one of the reasons that Payne ended up going to Alabama, but it's been really tough for him. I mean, he appeared in 14 games this past year, but he had 1 solo tackle, 9 total tackles, and in his career so far, I mean, he didn't play as a freshman, but in 19 games, he has half a sack. So, not a great career so far for Payne at Alabama, and Alabama dealing with the coaching change. It'll be interesting there. Moving on to the next potential bust, it is Kyle McCord. So Kyle McCord was a 5-star QB. You had the big situation with Ryan Day choosing McCord over J.J. McCarthy. Kind of a fringe 5-star ranked 28th overall. Whether or not you think McCord's a bust, I mean, his stats, they're not terrible. 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, a overall rating of 161. But for Ohio State, it's just not up to standard. When you've got those 5-star receivers, you've got the running backs, you've got all the weapons, and, at this point, you're talking about a 5-star QB having to transfer to Syracuse, a middling ACC program. I would certainly consider, and especially, I mean, what's Kyle McCord's future? Maybe if everything goes well, a 4th, a 5th round pick. This is a 5-star quarterback. That's basically a bust unless he somehow turns it around in the NFL. Not a lot of mobility for McCord. That was another issue for him. The next one, it is Kamar Wheaton, originally from Texas. He ended up committing to Alabama as the number 34 overall player, a running back, and he did not play a single down at Alabama. He ended up transferring after his true freshman season and committed to SMU, and I'm sure a lot of SMU fans were very happy. This is a 5-star running back. He's only going into his 2nd season, but his time with SMU has kind of been underwhelming. I mean, I guess the average is not terrible. 5.2 yards, 4.9. It's not great, but total rushing yards, 732 in 2 seasons. Kind of playing a 1B type running back, almost by committee, Wheaton, with SMU, but there's another potential bust right there. And then just kind of looking back at the class in general, this was Ohio State's and Alabama just going crazy in terms of recruiting. So you had Quinn Ewers reclassifying from 2022 to 2021. He had the perfect 1,000. He only played 2 snaps for Ohio State. There's Foreman at number 2, J.C. Latham. So this is interesting. Alabama signed the top 2 offensive tackles. They were both top 6 overall players. It's just crazy. Latham, the number 3 player. And Latham, originally, everyone thought he was going to commit to Ohio State. JT Tuimoloau has that weird recruitment where he stretches it past signing day, ends up committing to Ohio State. It was between Ohio State and Oregon. Jack Sawyer, from Ohio, he stays home. Really, JTT and Jack Sawyer have been underwhelming based on where their recruiting ranking was. Brockermeyer, the other offensive tackle, now at TCU. Caleb Williams obviously should have been the number 1 player in this class. He was at number 7. Originally from Washington, D.C., and he went to Oklahoma and then followed Lincoln Riley to USC. Mims, the offensive tackle, I would say he pretty much lived up to the billing. He possibly could be a 1st-round pick this year. I saw he's coming out. Dallas Turner is another one that's probably going to be a 1st-round pick, top 10 overall player. Abuka's an interesting case. So Abuka, the number 1 wide receiver in the class from Washington, goes to Ohio State, and, coming into this last year, everyone thought Marvin Harrison Jr. and Abuka were guaranteed to be 1st-round picks, and Abuka's dealt with injuries. It was just not a great Ohio State offense with McCord, and, he probably would have been a fringe 1st-round pick, but he decided to come back to school. Leonard Taylor is an interesting case. I believe he's coming back to school for Miami. Sam Hurd, obviously a bust. Sanders, the tight end, very lengthy kid. Lay, the offensive tackle for Clemson, I'm not sure about him. And James Williams, I know, is coming out. He'll be a part of this draft class. But either way, just kind of looking back at some of the players, interesting to see how they turned out. But technically, it's only, this is only the class of 2021, so a lot of these kids still have their senior seasons left. But either way, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.